talking to one of my favorite people. And Jane, I was just so delighted when, as an elder of my church, you said, yes, I'll absolutely talk to you and your friends about forgiveness and healing. And, it's hard. People do things to us and we wish it were easy just to let it go. But it's not. It's never easy. It's complicated, and we might hold grudges for years. Um, what does Scripture tell us, Jane? Like what should we do? Ideal world, what would we do?
Ideal world is we're able to just forgive everyone when they wrong us, and that it doesn't take a while. We're able to do it right away. We have no leftover feelings about it, and we can just let it go completely.
Yes. Oh, that just sounds so
If it's
ideal.
really that easy. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's our goal, right? We're trying to get there. So I've been having conversations, Jane, with different people, different backgrounds about this whole process of forgiveness and healing from their perspective. And I know that you were sexually assaulted when you were 18 years old. Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you were in college, and I have already advised the viewers that, should any of our conversation be a trigger for them, make sure they have the supports that they need around them, so that they don't sort of drift away to a dark place. So our focus, though, is really on your path to the forgiveness and healing. So you were assaulted. You didn't drop out of college. You stayed in college and graduated, obviously. Did you take any time off?
No, it actually happened in my first month at college as a freshman. So it was really early on.
Wow. Okay. So very early on. Was it reported to the authorities on campus?
No, after it had happened, I think I was just in a state of shock. And I thought about all the different options. Like, do I tell my family? Do I, call someone? And I really just didn't know what to do. And I thought about the consequences of each of those options of talking to different people. And I just ended up keeping it to myself, suppressing it for a very, very long time. Until, much later in my life that I finally deal with it.
And when you say you suppressed it for a very, very long time, what's that mean? How long?
Probably like close to 25 years.
So was it on your mind regularly or weekly?
I don't think so. I think, I had buried it so deep inside. It wasn't like I thought about what had actually happened. But I think my suppressed feelings of anger, hurt, all the different things that went along with that situation manifested itself in other areas of my life without me even realizing it. Like we talk about triggers, and I think I had triggers. I just didn't realize it had to do with what had happened to me in the past until I finally dealt with it. So
but how did you put that together, Jane, to know, since we're talking about many years of no therapy, no processing this, not talking about it, how did you know that certain behaviors were related to what had happened to you when you were in college?
Yeah. So I actually didn't realize anything was related until much later, like I said, 25 years later. I recall hearing a sermon one day, and I was sitting there listening to the sermon, and I thought to myself, the sermon was all about wearing masks, how we go through our life wearing masks, not being who we really are or hiding who we are. And something about that particular sermon was a huge trigger, and it opened the door for me to realize, wow, I have been living a life for the last, 20 plus years, not even realizing that what had happened to me back then was manifesting itself in all different ways, and that I was actually really broken inside. And everyone thought I had it all together, and I was just, oh, she's a great Christian, a model Christian, all this other kind of stuff. And inside, I felt so broken. And I think when I heard that sermon, I realized that's me. That's who he's talking about. I'm this person with this mask on. I've been wearing this mask since for the last, 20 plus years. And that just opened the floodgate, and all the emotions and all the suppressed feelings just resurfaced from that incident. And I was left in a situation where I didn't even know how to deal with it. I didn't even know how to handle all the different things I was feeling, because there was so much mixed in there with my current life versus my feelings from back then, what was what. And I really just kind of fell apart at that point.
All right, so let's go backwards to that period of time in college where you didn't report it to the authorities, but what other supports did you have that we know now that you didn't talk to, but was there, like your parents or maybe a good friend from high school, someone you had some history with?
Yeah.
Did you feel that was not an option, and why?
So in terms of my family, like my parents, I come from a very traditional Chinese background, and in our background, we don't really talk about feelings. We're not very physically affectionate. We don't really verbally affectionate either. I mean, everyone knows that we care about each other. Everyone knows that, we love each other, but we don't actually verbalize any of those things. And also, with the Chinese culture, it's very much like the children are a reflection of the parents. And so when you do something, if you get good grades and you have a successful career, that's a very good reflection on your parents. It's like you're honoring and respecting your parents by doing something positive yourself. And if you're in a situation that perhaps doesn't shed a positive light on your parents, in a sense, you're dishonoring them. And so when everything had happened to me, the first thought was to call my mom. And then I thought to myself, okay, well, what is she going to say? How is she going to react? How is this going to reflect on her and my father? Am I going to put them in a position of feeling dishonored in a way? And these were the thoughts that were running through my head. And I ended up deciding not to tell my parents because I didn't want to put them in that position. I didn't want to have them feel like they were ashamed of me, or that, I did something wrong, and now there was a poor reflection on them. And so I didn't talk to I didn't tell anyone in my family. And it was early on at college. I was only there like less than a month. And so I didn't even really have a lot of friends yet up there to talk to. I wasn't close with my roommates, and I really had hardly met anyone at that point. So there was nobody I could confide in up there. And, back home, I did have one or two close girlfriends who, I could have talked to, but it's almost like you think about what's going to happen after you share your story, and you're so afraid of how people are going to react. What are they going to say? Because you already feel horrible as it is. Are they going to understand? Are they going to think I did something wrong? Are they going to blame me? I don't know. And I think the fear of that and what could come as a result is enough to sort of push people not to say anything when something like that happens.
And I'm glad that you broaden the conversation to sort of victims of sexual assault, whether it's male or female. Something traumatic happens to you, but somehow the mind is triggered to think, well, how will other people receive it if I tell? So a large percentage of victims of sexual assault really don't tell anyone, or they don't report it to the police. And and I know people are critical of that. Oh, it must not have really happened. If she or he didn't report it to the police, then it just must not have happened, because surely if it did, of course you want to report it to the police. It's not like a robbery, where someone takes your bicycle from you and you want to go and get your bicycle back.
Yeah.
It's so much more layered than that, as I understand it. It's like someone took something from you that no one can give back to you easily, right? Mm-hmm. Your integrity, your self-esteem, your sense of worth, right? So it's different in that respect. And you also brought up the point of what's going to happen if I do tell someone, then a whole lot of other things are going to happen that might make me feel worse. Is that right?
Yeah, because then it's like, okay, am I going to eventually have to then report it to the authorities? What position is that going to put me in? Then now you have to bring in the other person involved in it. And do you want to even face that and any type of interaction with that person? So there's, then the public knows it. Then it becomes like more and more. And then you walk around a campus where you already don't know anyone. And now you're looked at as, oh, is that the girl that happened to? And it's like,
yes,
you think about all these things and it's like, is it worth it? And you tell yourself, you know what, I can deal with it. I'll figure it out. I'll get through it. And you suppress it. And so many people end up doing that, unfortunately. And I think too, when people say, well, if it wasn't that bad, it must not have really happened or something. I think people don't realize that a lot of times sexual assault happens from somebody you know. And so then there's also the fear of like, okay, well, they're going to believe that person. Or, it's not like, we're walking down the street and it's a complete stranger. And I think that might be a very different scenario than it being somebody who, is an acquaintance, in some capacity. And I think that plays a role too.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jane. For so long, the way we perceived sexual assault was it's the person that jumps out of the bushes at you, right? Yeah. And I think because we viewed it that way, we would take some other risks that shouldn't have been taken. I always think about children. We hear about all the Boy Scouts that were sexually assaulted. Of course, children within the Catholic Church. So we saw all those scenarios as really being relatively risk-free. So certain precautions weren't taken, to protect those victims. We saw it as, and I really don't know how that concept was spread, but it allowed us to believe that it's those bad criminal people out there that prey on people, that rape women or rape children. It's some bad weirdo walking down the street. So you're afraid of the weirdo when really your caution needs to be taken with that person that you're close to, right? This person that you're going on an isolated date, a first date with, and they look nice enough, they're your age, they're at your school, so they must be okay. Right. No. And we know better now. But it took a long time to get to this point. And it's really a process of, educating the public. So as we talk about this path of yours to healing, what was that turning point? You mentioned something about 20 some years, 23, 24 years. What was going on over that period of time? And at what point did you see a change in your perspective toward forgiveness?
I think when that floodgate opened again and I was sort of in that dark place of dealing with all the different emotions and everything that came with it, I felt really broken. But at the same time, I think that was probably the most important time in my life too, because I felt the closest to God. As strange as that sounds, it just seems like I would feel the farthest away from him, but I felt the closest to him because, in those dark moments, I was alone. I didn't have anyone. Nobody knew. I was dealing with all these emotions, and it wasn't like I was calling a friend to talk to or anything like that. Like when everything first resurfaced, I was by myself. But the only person who did know was God. And so in those dark moments, those were the moments that I spent a lot of time with Jesus. And so that really was a pivotal point in my Christian walk. And I think from that, I just, this kind of was going on day in and day out for a very long time. And I had a close friend of mine who wanted to do Bible studies with me. And I thought to myself, I can barely even make it through the day, let alone try to do Bible studies. But, you can't say no to somebody who wants to do Bible studies. So I agreed. And, when I was doing these studies, and it was daily studies that we did together, I didn't feel like I could fully share my relationship with Jesus was unless this person knew what had happened, because my closest moments with Jesus was in these darkest times. And, you know, when this person asked me, my friend would ask me, well, what's your relationship like? Like, how do you feel? How do you have a personal relationship? And I couldn't describe anything more personal than Jesus being with me in those dark moments, like literally feeling like he was with me. And so that kind of opened the door for the healing to start, because then I confided in someone who really gave me a lot of support for the first time in my life, and that kind of started the road to healing.
Yes. And so, did you have a period of time where you were really depressed and just feeling like it was very hard for you to function on a daily basis?
Yeah, after I had heard that sermon about the mass and that resurfacing, I mean, I spent, I don't know how long it was, I want to say 6 months to a year, just every day, just, you know, I remember my family, you know, going off in the morning to school, to work, or whatever, and I literally would crawl back in bed and just cry all day long, or just be numb and depressed, and I couldn't function. And then before I knew they were going to come home, I'd get up, try to shower, just make myself look like I hadn't been, you know, crying all day long. And I did that for a long time. And then that's when my friend had come and asked me to do Bible studies. And I thought, I'm so broken right now. How can I even help you learn about God when I can't even function, you know, right now? But that's exactly what God knew I needed at that moment. And, you know, in starting it, I thought I was doing the Bible study to help my friend learn about Jesus, when really it was like a pivotal thing that I needed at the moment to heal, which I didn't even realize when I started the Bible study.
Yes. And so you shared with her, I gather, you shared with her
Him.
him. I'm sorry. You see how I just assumed that. Okay, so you shared with him the story of the sexual assault, and he ended up, you know, as continuing with the studies and incorporating, I guess, your mutual bonding, your mutual story sharing, and that helped you along. But at some point, did you also have professional help? Did you ever go to a therapist about it?
Well, my friend was always encouraging me to go seek professional help. And at that point, I still had, I don't know, I had enough these issues where part of it was I didn't want anyone to know I was going to get professional. Like, I still had this thing about me where I felt like it was somehow I played a role in this whole thing, and it was my fault. And, you know, I carried a lot of guilt and shame for so long that I almost worried about what someone would think of me, you know, specifically my family. Like, if all of a sudden I'm going to therapy, like, you know, are you going to therapy all of a sudden? Like, you haven't talked about anything for 25 years, and all of a sudden you need to see a therapist. Like, you seem okay. You know, like, it's like nobody knew everything behind the mask, you know? And so I really resisted going to therapy. As crazy as it sounds, I almost felt like I couldn't even get myself to pay money to do that. Like I wasn't worth that, you know? I wasn't worth spending the money on to try to deal with the issue. That's how low my self-worth was. And so I had told my friend, and I said, you know, these Bible studies are like therapy. So let's just, I'm going to use this for now as therapy and see how far I can get. And if at some point in time, I think I need to go to a professional, then I'll do that. But for now, I feel like this is helping me. So let's just stay with this, you know. But my friend was always encouraging me to get professional therapy. It was more of something in my own mind.
Yeah, well, like you said, you were still in that place of feeling like you're not worthy, right? The self-esteem wasn't there, and that investment, whether it's time or money, somehow you weren't worth that investment.
Yeah,
but you knew that you were on the right track. So that's really good. All right. So then at some point, I understand that you recognize that your issues were, you know, tied to what happened in college, and you had been carrying a grudge. You had been carrying the hurt and still, I guess, animosity. I'll say animosity toward your perpetrator.
Yeah. And I didn't think didn't realize I was. But I did. I had resentment. I had anger. I think I had a lot of anger from what had happened, and also anger that it had affected me so many years. I think when I finally resurfaced and I realized how much was going on, it was like, wow, you really screwed up my life for the last 25 years. Or honestly, I allowed it to, to kind of, because I didn't deal with it. So I, in a sense, I take partial responsibility for that because I didn't do anything to try to heal, nor did I realize I even needed healing. I just kind of thought, okay, well, if I put in this little part of my brain and just leave it alone, and I have dealt with it, but I really didn't. And so I did. I carried a lot of anger, resentment, hurt, and I think it was coming out in different ways in my life that I didn't realize were connected to that, because I think those type of feelings you have never completely go away. That your mind works to protect yourself, but somehow those things still linger, but they may come out maybe in your relationship with your spouse or your relationship with your kids or how you interact with others. You don't realize that you have this underlying thing inside that you haven't dealt with. And so, yeah.
So I understand that you also wrote a letter of forgiveness. You got to a point where you knew that your healing required forgiveness. Tell us about that.
So through these Bible studies, we were studying the Gospels, so mostly the New Testament. So a lot of that, of course, is the life of Jesus, and looking at him as our example. And certainly a lot of what we're studying was about forgiveness. And I remember one time when we were doing our studies, my friend had suggested to me, maybe you should write a letter to this person and say everything that you feel. And if you feel like you've come to that place where you are ready to forgive, then make that part of the letter too. And I remember thinking, I really don't want to write this letter, but I started writing it, and it was so healing. I remember sitting there writing the letter, just bawling almost, just so much emotion coming out. And I was able to, tell this person how my life has been the last, 25 years and everything I felt that was a result of what had happened. And at the very end of it, I gave him forgiveness, and I also prayed for him. And I said, I really hope at this point in your life, you are a different person and you're not who you were before, and that you've come to realize what was done, and that I pray that that's never happened to anyone else again. And I didn't think it would be, but it was extremely healing. And for the first time after that, I felt at peace. And that was kind of like the start of, of the healing.
And you weren't able to send your letter of forgiveness to him. You didn't know where he was. This is 20 some years later.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I held on to the letter, and then, after I wrote it, I read it a few times over to myself just to kind of reinforce what it is I was saying, reinforce the forgiveness, and make sure that it wasn't I was just writing just to write. I really wanted to experience it. And after that, I just tore it up.
And you never had an opportunity after the assault to even talk to him about it, even to get his apology?
No. But I don't, at the time, just from my brief interactions with him, seeing him on campus or things like that, or the way he would look at me, it was always a little bit of I don't even know how to describe the look, but it wasn't a look of he did anything wrong. It was a look of, kind of smirk. Whatever type of thing. And so, at least through my time in college and, still seeing the person, I never felt like there was any type of remorse on his end. But
so you had to forgive without an apology.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In my last interview with Dolores Elder Jones, that was one of the things that we talked about, letting go without the apology. And sometimes we have to do that. We have to do it for our own good. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Because then it's like you really can't move forward. It's like the things you hold on to weigh you down, and it affects you in all aspects of your life. And I feel like since that time that I've been able to get to a better place, like the burden is just so much lighter. And it was my own burden that I chose to carry all these years,
Yes. Yeah.
But, and for whatever reason, it happened in its time. I don't question it. It's more just like, it must have happened now because that's just what needed to happen. And,
Right.
think the good that God still brings out of everything. Just, a simple Bible study became, pivotal for that person who was receiving the Bible studies because they wanted to learn about Christ. It was, huge for me in terms of starting me on a road to healing. And so, God's always on time.
Yes. Now, was there anyone else that you needed to forgive in order to effectuate this healing?
Yeah, I think, early on, the very first person I ever told was actually my husband. Well, at the time, we were dating, and that conversation didn't go very as well as I would have hoped. And so I think there was definitely a level of resentment that I carried for a while because I just, when it didn't go how it was supposed to go, in my mind, it reinforced, well, this is why you shouldn't tell anyone. This is exactly why you just keep the same thing to yourself, because this is what you're going to get back. And so, and I think it also reinforced your low self-worth and your low self-esteem and the guilt and the shame and all those things. And, I carried that through our relationship, and never, and because I never dealt with it, I think some of those hardened feelings and some of that resentment went towards him because he was the person in front of me that I could see every day. That the anger could go towards, or the resentment can go towards, when really a lot of the underlying resentment was for somebody else. And so through that process too, I came to a place of forgiveness, for my husband as well, because that carried through all those years too.
And what about yourself? Did you feel like you had to forgive yourself?
Yeah, I did, because for so long, and I know a lot of people out there who have gone through a similar situation, blame themselves, and they live with this guilt and shame for so long. And, I think that was probably one of the hardest things to do, was actually forgive myself. I think it actually may have even been harder than forgiving him, the perpetrator, because, it's finally being able to let go and say, wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Like, you're not to blame, and you're more than what you think you are, and you're better than what you think you are. And so, and to get to that place is tough. And I think that's one that took the longest to forgive. And it's an ongoing thing, because you do get triggers, and you do get different situations that happen where you start to feel bad about yourself again, and somebody says something, it's like, and it reinforces what you used to think. And you think, oh, and it's so easy to go right back to that mindset of how you were before. And so you have to be really intentional to fight it, and to tell yourself, no, I'm not that, I'm different, I'm somebody else. And so that forgiveness against yourself, for yourself, is probably the hardest, because we're the hardest on ourselves. You can eventually look past issues with other people, but for yourself, you're kind of always at battle.
Yeah, always a battle, always that negative self-talk, just like an evil spirit. I see it as like this little evil demon that's on my shoulder, and it's just saying like all kinds of horrible things for that day. And there's probably some science behind it, who knows, but it's so destructive. It's destructive to your relationships, destructive to how you feel about yourself. So that remains a daily battle. But I firmly believe that if we constantly remind ourselves that we are made in the image of God, and that God wants the absolute best for us, then that pushes away that negativity. Because where does that negativity come from? Maybe rooted in childhood, but who knows where it's rooted? But if you really believe that God only makes good things, and that God only wants good for you, then that helps you rebalance, right?
Right.
Push it away, because that the negative self-talk is never going to lead to anywhere good.
Yeah.
Never.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, well, Jane, it's been great learning about your journey toward forgiveness and healing. I want to say that I'm sending you a virtual hug, because you shared something that was a very tough part of your life for the purpose of encouraging and supporting other people. And and that's never easy to do. But you recognize that, I mean, we're here to support each other. And sometimes in our secrecy, we end up not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, which of course, hurts other people, in the sense that you're depriving them of some good knowledge that you have, some wisdom that you have, because you're keeping up your facade, right? But you've released yourself, you've released that, and you're no longer living in that place where you have a facade and you're smiling. You did the hard work. Will you agree with me that it's hard work?
Yeah, it is hard work. You have to be really intentional to do that, to push away the negative self-talk, to let go of things. I mean, sometimes it's a daily battle where you have, because our mind and our natural, tendency is towards the negative. And so we do have to be really intentional, and healing it's a journey. I don't think you ever get to a point where it's like, oh, I'm good, because things always happen in your life that make you feel like, oh, I'm back there again, I'm in that mindset again. And so you have to, but the more you fight it, the less and less you're there in that dark place. So.
Yes. And surround yourself too with people that support you and encourage you,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, we love you, Jean, and I thank you again. And I pray that this story, this conversation will just be shared, and that it will be helpful to many people.
Well, I appreciate
All right. Yes. Okay. Well, bye-bye. And I will see you soon enough.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Bye-bye. Wow. Jane is just so incredible, to think that she felt comfortable enough to come and share something so personal. A lot of times we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. I've certainly been guilty of that. People who read my book, She Just Disappeared, A Mother's Faith Journey to Find Her Child, they often said to me, I didn't know any of this was going on. I didn't know that you felt this way. I didn't know you were in this kind of pain. It's because I didn't share. I didn't talk about it. Sometimes it could have been related to, someone blaming me, feeling like they would blame me for something. I remember post publication of my book, someone said, well, maybe it was all caused by you not returning home to Memphis and being with your family. And that was so problematic on so many levels. But that is a tendency. People want to explain things. Their brain wants to find a category so that it's all clear to them. So in that woman's mind, like, none of this would have happened to my family if I had merely returned to my birth home and been around my family. And, she didn't know anything about my family and whether that would have been good or not. But that's the tendency to sort of blame the victim. And there are many articles about that tendency, blaming the victim. So I'm just so glad that Jane has overcome that, and she's at a point now where she feels like she can share. And I hope you found our conversation helpful. And please share with someone else if you think the conversation might help them along too. We're on a journey to healing. Until next time, thank you. Bye.